Good morning. Welcome to the Explosive Measure podcast with Tommy, Mike, and Seth. You can see Tommy and I are in the same place. We went to I guess the Dynamics Power BI conference. So it's been really interesting to get together. We're traveling a lot. So here we are. We're going to do a little bit different format today.
It's really weird to do this.
Touching. No touching. This is all online. Hey guys.
Exactly.
Hey guys.
Well, now I can actually reach over and do the things I've been when I get angry now about the things.
Yeah,
I can
so
react.
true.
So no, Houston. We're in Houston for the Community Summit 2021.
Yep.
It starts today.
Yeah, it starts today.
So, and I believe you're speaking.
I'll be on Friday, and you got 2 sessions.
I got 2 sessions. I'm starting today, and then I'm going on Wednesday.
What are you guys talking about?
So my topic's on what I've been talking about all year. I've been doing Charticulator. So I'll do a quick demo, walk through the program, teach people how it works. And yours are a bit more.
Mine's on the value of stake on winning bets.
Yeah.
So just because for everyone, we've decided. I think we decided a place, Papa's.
I think so.
So about basically, I want to bet, and it's going to be redeemed this week. Besides that, the other additional 2 sessions that no one cares about are I'm going to be talking about today is on why you fail to build reports, why people stop looking at your reports, and I'm going to be talking about the ABCs of building a report. Basically, always be calculating compared to Glenn Ross, always be closing. We show the edited version of the famous Alec Baldwin speech.
Mm-hmm.
And we basically try to apply that. So, but depending if it's after hours, then we show the actual one. Because I always tell everyone, YouTube this after, watch it on your own. It's so much better. But I also can't show F words during a conference.
Exactly. So it was fun. We got Tommy, myself, and we met with Steve Campbell. He came over from London, and so. Tommy's like, hey, I just got to the hotel. I'm hanging out, just chilling. And so I'm in the airport. I'm texting Steve. I'm like, hey, Steve, where are you? He's like, I'm flying in. I'll be there in like 15 minutes. So I'm like, okay, I'll wait around. I go get a beer, sit down in the chair, just watch. And Steve's like, I'm here. I'm at gate C8. I'm like, C8? Where's C? This is like one terminal. There's like no C's anywhere. He's like, yeah. I'm asking. I'm like, where you standing next to? I'm like, okay, I'm looking around. I'm like, okay, I'm near BW3s. Go find a BW3. So he starts asking people, where's BW3s? And the lady's like, I don't think that's in this terminal. I think it's in another terminal. And Steve's like, what's going on? So he texts me again. He goes, I think I'm in the wrong airport or different airport. Because Houston has 2 airports. I was on the north side and he was on the other side. So we had a hard time just finding each other. So we just said, screw it. We're just going to take Ubers. We'll come back to the hotel or the apartment, and that's where we're going to stay.
Well, keep in mind, I was already late. Mike called me. He's like, hey, I'm at the airport. I'm going to wait for an hour for Steve. And it's like, okay. And then it's like 10:30.
Before you continue on with the story, we're super laggy, pausy, and fuzzy on YouTube. So maybe we cut the video streams.
We'll see. Yeah, we can do that. I don't have a background for that
one. I'll edit this out eventually. Oh, the beauty of live.
Kevin Arnold says he's in Houston, so you guys should check see if you can connect with him.
Well, we also found an amazing brewery a mile away that we made some choice decisions yesterday.
Yeah.
They have putt-putt and about like 25 beers they make there. So nice little outside.
Lot of tasting of the beverages.
Yeah, we did the flights, tried it out. So
any big favorites?
Mike, I think liked, what did you like? Well, he got a flight of like a blueberry side. I like the cheesecake one, and then I know this sounds very male. We're talking about beer, and then the Hefeweizen that they had. Their wheat beer was amazing. So I did tell the person up front, like, you will see us again. How's that?
Any better?
We shall see.
All right, we'll give it a whirl. I'm nervous about the laptop because I think it throttles. I was talking with Rui Romano, and so the Surface Book 3s, when they get hot, they start ramping down. So I turned on a fan, move some air. Hopefully it'll cool down. We'll see what happens. Let's keep going.
So anyway, you show up and Steve and you are at least at the same airport, but
At
just
different airports.
not.
Totally different
Oh.
airport.
Oh, I thought you said different terminals. So
No,
he
no.
is at a different airport.
There's 2 airports in Houston.
Yeah, did not know this. So I'm waiting around for like an hour and a half for
10:30,
Steve to show
yeah.
up. Yeah,
Messages at 10:30 flying, like, meet me in the middle. Where's the middle? Meet me at C. I don't see any letters.
meanwhile, Tommy's laughing at
Oh
the
my God.
apartment because he's watching us text back and forth. Like, we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, I was like, and I even said, you guys call each other. Call. And then they figured out the reason why one sees the letters and the other doesn't, because it's a different address for an
Different.
airport.
Whatever.
We're here though.
That's
We made
that's
it.
funny. So you finally connected. You're all together.
Yeah.
What do you guys? What are you guys talking on?
So I'm doing a talk on Charticular. So I'll be doing a full deep dive, going through the icons, checking out all the different pieces around Charticulator. So that's what I'll be doing. Tommy?
So, yep, I'm doing a fan favorite that we did at a user group. Why I failed at building reports. Why people stopped looking at a dashboard or a report that you built, and that is today. And then the next one I'm doing is a Glengarry Glen Ross. Always be calculating, but we always show the edited version of the Glengarry Glen Ross Alec Baldwin famous monologue. And for those watching who have never seen this famous monologue, make sure you have headphones. Watch it after the podcast. Basically, it's just put in Glengarry Glen Ross and famous speech. And
Yeah.
it's motivating, but also very depressing at the same time.
Right.
So today's topic, we're going to jump into just a bunch of things that we built in reports. Maybe didn't work out. Maybe we learned something through it. Just kind of kicking around maybe elements we learned around early building reports. So I'll kind of kick things off. When did I fail at building reports is technically the title. So I'll have one instance where we were building a lot of reports. And so I had one report where I needed to do a bunch of aggregations. And I think at the time, I didn't really understand how hard it was or not hard, more like when your data model is not right, you spend a lot of time building very complicated decks. So I spent a little bit of time bringing in tables from a SQL server or something like that. And then I worked really hard at writing this super complex decks. I had an aggregation table and like a lot of them. So I basically ran my machine out of memory. There was nothing left in it. So that was my biggest challenge, was I had to go back and redesign all the M tables upstream so that I could actually understand, hey, these pre-aggregate features were already being done upstream, and that made my model like have a lot less memory. I could just import all the data. So there was like a huge moment for me where I was like, oh my gosh, I really need to start thinking harder about how my data model's built and how do I bring all those tables together. And that was kind of aha moment. I thought Power Query could do everything. I was like, let's just get it raw, just throw it at it. So then I had to think really hard about going upstream and building the data tables that needed up there. So that was just kind of one moment for me where I was like, spent a lot of time just building something that didn't work. And then I had to go back and kind of rebuild it, reinvent it, shaping those tables. And I think that's a common challenge,
Yeah.
especially coming from like an Excel world where we spend a lot of time there.
Yeah. Well, and I was wondering, is the addition of business requirements? Because for me, like when I thought about the instances in my own history of a report failing or just something not working out, it's never because I started wrong, so to speak, but it's always because it was not clear what we needed to do, or there's an addition of. So like, why were you doing all the Power Query in the beginning? Did you know exactly the game plan? and it was the assumption was wrong, or were things being added on?
It's a good question. So in this case, I knew what I wanted to produce. I knew it was right.
Okay.
So like, it wasn't the requirements were vague.
Yeah.
It was like, I didn't know how to pre-aggregate information. So it was like around the idea of like, we wanted to take a bunch of raw data
Mhm.
and look at it different ways. And so we had to, it's this, how do you
Or
say
did
it?
aggregations just come out and you couldn't wait to try it?
It's like the example where if you're doing like a row level calculation, like a sum X,
Mhm.
you have to do something at the row level, but then you sum the total. So the multiplication had to happen at the row level,
Mhm.
and then you had to do like the adding
Yeah.
action after that. So it's something similar like that, but I couldn't do it because I had to aggregate and summarize the tables first and then do the calculation.
Yeah.
So I should have just done that in SQL and
Right.
just brought in the pre-aggregated tables as opposed to doing like summarize 10 times.
Right.
Because I had like all these different grains and I was trying to aggregate by different levels because all the math needed to happen at the row level, and
Yeah.
then you had to summarize it.
Yeah.
So that's what screwed me up. But you live and learn from that one.
Yeah. You
Don't do what I do.
You never forget.
Yeah, that's a true statement. Seth, you got one that was like a moment you were like, what am I doing?
Yeah, I think, for me, the topic kind of breaks down into two different areas, right? Like, what are the ways in which you can fail hard at a report, and one is obviously technical, which you outline, and the other is communication. Like, if you think about our job, so much of it is communicating insights and information and like the right filter of what like taking the raw data and shaping it to what the customer wants to see. So I think a lot of our recommendations come out of the communication areas. And I would say many of the ways I've failed in the past are all related to not listening to customers in the right way. And asking enough questions, right? Like a business user knows what they want in their mind, but especially when you're reshaping how you want them to interact with that data, or you're going to aggregate things, there have been a lot of cases and a lot of reports where you build something and then you're back to the drawing board, build something back to the drawing board, and it's the bad kind of iteration, right? Where you just you missed the mark, try again. But as some of those things that we talk about a lot, like that I've learned from that, I would say are saying things like, let me repeat back what you're saying, right? Or I'm hearing you say this thing, and just by repeating back or iterating back to the person what it is you're consuming from their information. There's a lot of times they're like, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, and then you drill down and you get to the what the meat of the conversation.
I like that.
In many ways, I also say, things like, so if I create something like, X, you would want it to behave like, this, right? Like, so visualizing what's on the page, what you would be building for them, walking through those things are techniques that I recommend, because absolutely I've failed 100% at each one of those steps. And I would say, the biggest thing, because of a lot of those failures in communication that, come from the past, are learning techniques of how do you translate what someone is saying into the visual realm. And when you spend time like reading about like the types of visualization and what each visual is good for, you start to draw correlations between when somebody says, I want to see this over time, right? You want it? Great. I know I'm already in a line chart, like, how do you want to see that? Do you want to see it, month over month or year over year? Or like, okay, now I have options, I could do this, or I could do a bar chart, so I think there's a lot of those techniques that, we've talked about a lot, but all of those, for the most part, come from, a breakdown in that communication with the end user that I've experienced in the past.
You bring up an interesting realm of the idea of failing at a report, because it's almost sometimes that you listen, but you need to sell them on the solution, where someone's like, it'd be great. I wish I could get from here to there, that mile in about 3 minutes or less. You need a car. No. No, I would really love 4 wheels, an engine, be able to sit while I get there. You need a car. No, that's not what it is. Stop saying a car because that's not what we need. You're like, okay, so and the other part's not listening too, right? But I've seen both of those cases where the end result is failing, so to speak. Like you failed. It's not so much you failed at building a report; you failed at delivering the solution or what they need or what they wanted. Because some people, because it talks about the audience. Some people will provide, be happy with what they need. Other people will just want what they want.
It's true.
And
tables.
Yeah. Right.
People just want tables.
Right. As we've confirmed before, which may be another session for another summit. Why tables?
Why tables? Alternatives to tables.
Yeah, all tables. But when you're dealing with a certain audience, and we've talked about audiences before, that it can very much go in if you don't know that person you're talking to, that even though you might have this solution, they want what they want.
True.
And I wonder how hard is it to either try to change their mind, so to speak, because this is a better solution, or maybe you just have to, I don't want to say give in, but you have to adhere or compromise for what someone wants.
I agree with that. Your conversation is spawning a thought, and it's around this idea of, I like this whole approaches of like small iterations to get to an answer. And I think sometimes when I take too large of a leap to assume or get to a point where I understand the framework, I know what part I can do, I know what I can't, and I can already listen to what they're saying, and I'm trying to project, like, you've asked for this, but here's how I would build the UI and the experience so it makes sense. But people don't know what they want until they've seen it. And I think a lot of times people will have like these requirements, but they can't build the report in mind. So like it's sitting down with them and so that's part of the process came from. Like, let's talk about insights. How do we make action on this? What do we do to like walk away from this report and have like clear objectives? So I think that's important to define what those are, and then walk through like what kind of charts are we going to put in front of them that's actually going to meet those objectives.
Right.
They give you the opportunity to get through like the action part.
Yeah.
So I think when you spend more time it helps out a lot.
Yeah. We've already crossed the part of the threshold of the podcast where I don't want this episode to end. So.
We're not even 30 minutes into it.
Seth, from what you were talking about before, then have you found it's more on the failure to listen or the failure to know the audience?
Oh, I think audience is a good one too, right? I think that is
That's
definitely
true.
part of it. Like you hitting the wrong grain of data, showing executives too much detail, not rolling up to, or asking about how you would roll up into KPIs or, higher level things that they can make decisions off of.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And I think that actually spawned that technique where, in general, Mike and I would typically do, 3 pages on a report, right? You do a super high level, you do the mid range, and then you do a detail. And like just by hitting those 3, typically when, you're in consulting, you're answering the audience question in the same report. But reports have a tendency to just, obviously flow up and down through there. You want to click on a KPI and you want to, have it drill down into a more finer grain, so I think that whole idea of, ripping through and just building things in a standard way also helps with that conversation, because you're thinking about the high level all the way down to the lowest level of grain. The lowest level of grain we've been doing for years, right? It's easy.
It's true.
It's a table. Right? So it just depends on what calculations you're throwing in it.
Oh man.
Go ahead.
So I got a lot of questions or just a lot of ideas, because it's amazing. We're in an odd industry where we could do everything right, from the magic of the power of query and the transformations, but we put 3 bad visuals on a page, and that could be considered a failed report.
That's a good point.
So because like we can do everything up front, the scoping, the data modeling, the connections, the DAX queries, get the numbers right. We can have the numbers right, but if we don't display it in a certain way for that audience, it could be considered failed, because one thing I say in this session is the only people who care how hard it was to get that number right are the people in this room.
That's true.
Nobody looking at your reports like, oh, did that DAX measure take you 15 hours? Did you have to scourge the internet and the community to try to find a new skill?
Yeah.
Oh, they're just like, that number's off.
Yeah.
Or that's not helping me.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's good to ask for opinions early.
Mm-hmm.
Ask for feedback. Help them like shape what you're trying to get into. And I think that's why I really like doodling on like a piece of paper or a whiteboard or just trying to get people's building things without color is helpful.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we'll get to a point where everyone's just focusing on color, everyone's distracted, and we're not really focusing on what are we trying to do?
Yeah, it's funny. I always preach the try to use Power BI as a sandbox.
Yep.
But I've actually failed in where we use it as a sandbox. We published a dev report.
Yep.
But then the assumption was the numbers were all wrong because it was like literally our first iteration.
Oh, yeah.
And the stakeholders were like, the numbers are not right. Why is it not right? Complain to the manager. And it was like, well, this isn't dev. Like, this is literally, we're playing in a sandbox.
Yeah.
But that part wasn't communicated because we had a theme. So it already looked pretty clear.
Yeah. It looks clean.
Yeah. So
I think one other area was sometimes when you work with, from a client perspective, there's always kind of educating them from where they are to what Power BI can do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of what we're talking about here too. When I walk into these engagements, it's usually like, here's my 6 Excel sheets, like amazing work that they've done there. But like, we just want to rebuild it. What? We're not going to rebuild exactly what you built in Excel in Power BI. Let's talk about what a data model is. Right. And so I've seen a couple projects where we build one data model and then we would just copy it like multiple times. And it's not bad, but we're changing like one parameter so that we can use a different model for like a different client or whatever. Right. And it's like, why aren't we thinking about how to pull it all together? I don't think it's like this is like, we don't know what we don't know. Mm-hmm. How would we build that?
Yeah.
And so they think there's a mentality of like understanding the framework, knowing what you can build. And then when you bring that to the table, then you can have these bigger conversations around, okay, let's rebuild it a little bit more, or let's not just do straight tables. And again, if you look at Microsoft, I think they're pushing a lot of the Analyze in Excel right now. You can now do pivot tables in an Excel document that are now refreshing off a data model
without a license. Yeah.
And that's so you can publish basically the Excel pivot table into the service.
Right.
And then as the data model changes, the Excel sheet is automatically getting the latest data. Now that's cool because I think a lot of our people like love that Excel piece of it.
Yeah.
And like, I was like, why isn't this a thing already? Like this should be like always up to date. Go to that Excel sheet. Boom, data's ready to go.
It's cool if your data model doesn't use your business terminology for all your columns and measures in the background. Because then they look like everything's broken.
A couple others that I'd throw in here is in the past is trying to add the latest new thing just to add the new thing.
That's a good point.
Being Power BI junkies, the next month release, it's like, oh yeah, like what do they got coming out? I've been waiting a long time for this one,
like when the new bookmarks come out. Yeah,
bookmarks.
Yeah, inevitably, those conversations lead to, what does this do and why is it there?
Yeah,
yes. Okay, well, you're not going to say because it's cool.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that amazing that you can do that in this report? Yeah, but it's not relevant, right? Like, I'm not doing
exactly.
with it.
I'm so glad you said that because we're not alone.
I've done that before.
Oh yeah.
There's a time to experiment and play. There's also time to build the report. You don't need to have all the new features in every new report.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you, but yeah, I'm so happy I'm not the only one on that.
Oh, dude, we've all done it in the past, right? So then number 3 would be like, and these are probably the 2 biggest ones is not testing calculations. Even if you're confident, you always run them through a battery, and then not iterating, right? Like think about building a report in an iterative fashion, because if you don't, you find yourself like a lot of mistakes I've made in the past all relate to I'm gonna go. Okay, I've got all my requirements. I'm gonna go in a hole and build this awesome thing. Come out and it's not what they want, right?
Yeah.
I think the calculations part is under stressed.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you guys do it, but if I build the model in the thin report, and so I will build in the model, I'll have extra pages where I'm doing spot checks
Yeah.
on the data. Like, I know this category should be this amount or roughly this amount. I'll go back through and I'll just like bring my measures over, make sure they're calculating correctly. Because how do you vet the data? Like, you need a little bit of QA on what's going on there. So I'll put in numbers, make sure it looks right, and I'll have extra pages that are not meant to be shown, but it's purely for the developer. Like, as I'm building measures and things, I'm checking them.
Test the year to date, test and see if it's rolling.
Does it make
way.
sense?
Yeah.
Like, we had like 10,000 when we should be like 1 million.
Everything
like,
looks
am
right,
I losing
but
decimal places?
Well, one visual shows 99999. You're like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's not right.
that might cause an error.
Yeah.
What's the item in the Marvel movies, the Tesseract? Is that the thing? The big like cube thing that was basically what everyone was after.
I think so.
So to
I'll
me,
go with it.
going to the preview features, it's not just preview features, but it's really the most powerful, most dangerous word or term that we use is what if.
Oh, true.
And because to say that with the previews where it's like you try this, like, well, what if I tried this? And we're doing that in a report dev or a report build where it's really just cool to us because something sparks. You're going through the process. You're like, well, what if I did a calculated column in the summer, a virtual table? Okay. Or you're trying to preview feature and you're trying it because it could work. But again, it maybe is not the best scope and you can break everything. So no, I completely agree. When you, especially when a preview feature comes out, you're like, whoa, and you want to try this out because you've been waiting, or it is a cool feature, but it's not ready for prime time. Do you remember when composite models first came out?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the little caveats that they didn't really promote as well as they should is if you enable this on this report, you can't publish this to the service.
Correct.
And there was no way of taking that back.
Yeah.
So when
You
you talk
break
about
stuff.
fail, right?
And it overwrites.
Yeah.
So you overwrite your models that you were using, and it just
You got to recreate it, or hopefully add version history.
stick it in SharePoint.
That I agree with. That yes, I can shake your hand and say yes, I agree.
Yes.
Version history and SharePoint. There you go. This is why we're live.
I think ultimately, you know, for me, I'm kind of glad we're having this episode just from the standpoint that, you know, you learn from the mistakes that we've made, but you know, a lot of the recommendations we make are based on those mistakes because nothing sucks more than presenting a report and coming out of that final presentation with a bunch of changes and people not excited about the insights.
Yeah,
And when you experience like the extremes, all of a sudden a lot of this clicks and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna chase that like really good feeling of like changing the way somebody's gonna do, like look at this data and it's gonna help them make decisions in their job and they absolutely love it, versus the opposite of that, which is, well, I put a little bit of myself in front of this report, you know.
Well, Seth, I'm so happy you said that because I was literally just about to ask you, does it count as failing if the report's fine? So you like that?
Not amazing, just fine.
Fine. Yeah, where you present it, it's the final product. You're doing a road show and you're showing the report. Things are correct. The model works, and people are like, okay, no questions, and the usage is low. And we've talked about this a little about usage, but does that count as failing? Because and maybe it's our own expectations to what people thought. Not necessarily every report should be where people are getting up on their desk, but if it's underwhelming to you, does that count as failing?
I think what has to be in here is you have to have some sort of expectation of how often your report is going to be used, right? Is this providing daily, hourly information that somebody has to be looking at this or their own thing multiple times per day? Or is this something that somebody's going to check twice, 3 times per week, you know, something like that?
Agreed.
So it depends on what the usage pattern should be. I think all of us want to build things that are useful. But I also think part of those patterns or part of what you're building has to be in the context of how often should it be used, right? If I'm if I'm checking this number on a weekly basis, it's okay that, of the 100 people you shared the report with, 75% are checking it once a week. But if
Mhm.
it's supposed to be the daily runtime thing where everybody's running their job off of it, or they're running it off their own Excel document and nobody's using your report, I
Yeah.
would say that's a problem.
So when I added thought there, I don't think it's a failure